Hi, everyone. Welcome back. This week we're talking about political organization, and there was just a couple of key kind of ideas that I want to touch on and explore as we do this. Okay, one of the big things that people don't understand about the anthropological approach to um, politics is that we don't really care about like the political parties the way that you think of it, right? When somebody says politics in the United States, we immediately start thinking about Democrats and Republicans or independents or libertarians or do you watch CNN or do you watch Fox and all that kind of stuff. That's not what we're interested in at all. Instead, what we're interested in is a broader idea of political understandings within a culture, right? What this really comes down to is power. What we are interested in is who has power and how is it legitimized, meaning how is it made real? This individual, you may love him, you may hate him, you may be so out of politics you don't even know who this is, right? I hope that's not the case. But this is Donald Trump. He is the president of the United States. Now, whether or not you like him, he is still your president. And please don't take that as an antagonistic statement. A lot of people were walking around going, not my president, after he was elected because they didn't really care for him. That's all cute, but the reality is he is your president. His power is legitimized by us, right? When I say power, what I mean is that he has actual power to compel you. We're going to talk about it in just a second about coercive power. If tomorrow the president decided to institute a draft, he can draft you, period. You don't like it, they throw you in jail, right? He can pass a law saying that you can no longer wear brown shirts, and that's just the law, period, right? It can be challenged, right, in the courts and things like that. But he can sign those things, right? He can decide we're going to bomb whatever country, right? He has that power, that ability to do that, and that's what we mean when we talk about power. Is just that that capacity to compel you to do certain things, right? Now, again, I want to get into like how is that power legitimized? For us, it is legitimized by a series of laws, starting with the American Constitution that says, this person, has an election and they win and they get to be president for 4 years and then they get to run again and they can win or lose. They get another 4 years and then we have a law that says that's it. You can only serve 2 terms, period. No coming back, right? Those kinds of things. And his power is legitimized through oftentimes mechanisms that people don't think about. One of the things that was controversial about the election of Donald Trump in 2016 was the fact that he didn't win the popular vote. The majority of Americans didn't vote for him. Well, then why is he president? Because that's not how we actually legitimize power. We do it through the Electoral College as a system. Again, some people hate that, some people love that, but that is actually how we go about it, right? And so we are curious, like, how do you think of that? Because Americans, anthropologists are very engaged right now, and several of us are writing on the fact that, like, you and I are, as Americans, are often very obsessed with, like, every vote matters, except it doesn't with the president, right? Not even close. Twice in my lifetime, and probably in yours too now, the Electoral College has said, no, the most people voted for candidate A, but we're electing candidate B, right? It's happened 5 times through the Electoral College or other mechanisms in American history. But nonetheless, it's a very important lesson about how we think about the political process, how we justify giving this power to somebody, but how it might actually work quite differently. Okay. Now, excuse me, we have two real organizing principles when we talk about this. The first is states and non-states, and I don't mean state like the state of Florida. I mean a political like nation state. Okay, a state has coercive power. They can tell you what to do, right? It doesn't matter what you want. They can tell you what to do. They can tell you like you cannot drive faster than 45 miles an hour on this road. It's like, well, I don't have to listen to them. Yeah, and they can write you a ticket. It's like, well, I don't have to pay it. Yeah, and then they come throw you in jail if you don't pay it, right? And I don't want to go. They don't care. They can force you. That is power. Okay, um, that is coercive power, right? So you have a centralized political power, right? In order to wield this, Marvin Harris, great anthropologist, also noted that they have standing armies or police because you have to have somebody that enforces your power, right? Your power to tell people that they can't drive too fast or throw garbage out of their car or walk around without pants or shoot people in the head and those kinds of things, right? So you're going to have a hierarchy here of some kind. There will always be a hierarchy. And the state is what grants rights. We have this fiction in the United States based on some of our founding documents that you and I have what we like to call inalienable rights, right? That's not true. All of your rights can be taken away because the state gives you those rights. So you say, no, I have the right to freedom of speech. Well, yeah, no, you can't go into a classic example of you can't go into a theater and yell fire. You'll go to jail for that. You don't have freedom of speech, right? Oh, you have the right to own a gun. Well, unless we convict you of a crime or put you on the terrorist watch list, and then we're like, no, you're not allowed to own a gun anymore, right? There is no right that you have that the state cannot take away, including life. The state is the only entity that we allow to kill people, and we're okay with it, right? Now, you may not personally be okay with the death penalty, but it does exist in many states, including Florida, right? And so we actually give them the power to literally take away everything, including your life, right? Um, this is a sort of in opposition to a non-state society. There is no coercive power, right? There's only kind of influence, right? They can't make you do anything. It is all sort of suggestion, right? But they can't force you to do anything, right? In a non-state society, you have actual individual autonomy, right? You are truly free. And you have more or less social equality. Everybody's pretty much on the same footing. There's a little bit here that can come down to things like age or, religion or standings and things like that, but not much, right? So why is it that we ever gave this up, right? We started out as a non-state, right? State power has only existed for maybe 10,000 years. It's a pretty new thing. So why did we ever give this up? Well, nobody ever woke up one day and went, you know what we ought to do? We ought to let Bob have power over us. We ought to let them over there be like, yeah, we got this. No. Most likely what happened is what we talk about is that after we had domestication and horticulture, after we start living in settled villages, right, we need somebody to help organize us, right? And we see this oftentimes in non-state societies. There'll be what's called a big man, and it talks about it in your book, but basically somebody that's in control, somebody that's not in control of you, but like, look, we need to be able to dig irrigation trenches and clear fields and build a granary to hold the grain, right? And we all need to work together. And we need somebody that'll organize this, right? So you get somebody that's real good at this kind of stuff, right? Often called a big man, right? And a big man will, get everybody kind of sorted out in that way. And then maybe they do things like, listen, somebody's got to be in charge of storing the food to make sure that it's fair. Like all of us as a village work together and we grow all of our potatoes or our wheat or our corn or whatever, and then we put it in this granary. And then we say, okay, look, we got to have this fair. Every family gets a basket a week or a bushel or a sack every other day or whatever it is, right? So we need to make sure that somebody is in charge of that so that it's fair, right? So that nobody takes more. Well, as soon as you have that, then you have the formations of this standing army or police force. You have a group of individuals that are in control of the food supply, and you don't need to control anything else if you control the people's food supply, right? And so it's not that we ever decided to just give this up. It was a gradual process whereby some individual started to gain coercive powers over us, and we said, yeah, it's fair, it's right. If somebody tries to take extra food, if somebody, whatever, that we should do something to that person, right? And so it was kind of a slow principle. One of the things that you'll see is that we talk about how political authority is organized, right? And in non-state systems, you have bands and tribes. A band has no formal leader, right? This is mostly associated with forager societies. They tend to be nomadic. You have between 20 and 100 people. They're almost all nomadic. There's a few that are settled, but not very many. Between 20 and 100 people. The flexible membership, meaning you can move between bands, but it's going to be kinship based. And so, well, if it's based on family, how do you move? Well, maybe right now, you know, you and your husband are living with your family, but your husband's band is living in an area that's a little bit better you hear about, so you decide to leave your band and go live with his band, or vice versa. Or maybe, you've got an uncle that started a band, and you're going to go live with them now, and things like that, right? So it's pretty flexible. You can come and you can go. But it's still going to be based on kinship, right? You're going to know everybody. And that's why there can be no formal leader. You can have a headman, you can have a village elder who's real smart, who knows things, and we tend to listen to him when he's like, "Look, I think we're kind of using up the game around here. I'm not seeing many deer. I think it's probably time for us to move on." Well, yeah, he's a better hunter than me. I'll listen to that guy, right? Next up, you have a tribe, which is when several bands kind of come together to work together. So, like horticultural and pastoralism, things like that, right? This can be anywhere from 100 to a few thousand. It's still often going to be kinship based, right? And this is where you really see that headman become a little bit more formalized. Still not having political power over you, but there is going to be somebody in this tribe that we sort of recognize as, he's kind of our mouthpiece. He talks for us. He's the one that kind of gets things organized and makes more decisions and stuff. But again, he can't force those decisions on us. It's just really still a position of respect, right? Now, your book talks about chiefdoms, and I have chiefdom as kind of halfway between non-state and state. Chiefdom is a complex term, and it's one that frankly has been applied in some odd situations. Traditionally, we say that a chiefdom is when multiple villages come under one chief, right? So a tribe is one village. They have one place that they live. When multiple tribes sort of have one leader, that's chiefdom. It's more centralized, it's more socially complex. Some anthropologists see this as an extremely distinct thing. Some anthropologists, myself included, don't really. In every situation that I've ever read about a chiefdom, what they're actually talking about is a kingdom. But for historic reasons, we didn't want to call them that. Well, why not? When you see European powers start to colonize Africa and North America and stuff like that, remember that these guys are living in kingdoms, which is a state level society, right? There's a person in power. They have coercive power. They have ultimate, they're an absolute monarch, right? In many cases, they have ultimate power here. And so I am sailing forth from the king of England or the king of Spain or the king of France or whatever, and I'm conquering these lands. And this king can literally just decide to cut my head off if he wants to. Why? Because he's the king. You have to respect the king. Kingship is considered divine, the divine right of kings. This is a big deal. So I can't attack a king. Well, then I show up in this land that I'm trying to steal from these people, and it turns out that they have kings too, right? But I can't acknowledge that he's a king because all kings are divinely inspired. And so instead, this is just a chief, right? He's just a chief. It's just a chiefdom. That's not always the case, but a lot of times what you see in the historic record is they say, well, I'm the chief. Well, who's going to be chief after you? My son will be chief after me, as I was, the son of my father, and then he was chief before me. Yeah, that's a king, right? So I kind of argue that we say chiefdom a lot when we don't really mean it. What we mean is kingdom. Okay, but for reasons of racism and geopolitics in the 1600s, we didn't want to acknowledge that. Okay, and then finally we do come to state systems, right? Kingdom, city states like the Maya, or some ancient Greece, right? And then ultimately nation states in a more modern context. So why have all this? Why do we have it? The main reason that we have this is for social harmony, right? To social order, to keep things on an even keel, right? To live life without having to worry about things just constantly. Having this is a really important part of maintaining a peaceable society, right? So it is about social control, right? In small scale societies, it's more one-on-one, it's personal. This is shaming, this is ridicule, it's people gossiping. They might ostracize you, even if we don't necessarily have power over you. We can ostracize you. We can say, like, look, I don't like what you're doing, so you can't come hunting or fishing with us anymore. We're not sharing tools with you. Or, there's no way that your son's ever going to marry my daughter. I won't allow it, those kinds of things, right? So it maintains this equilibrium. It's about harmony, right? In larger scale societies, you have less face to face accountability, right? When you're living in a band and there's 50 people, you literally know everybody. You and I don't know everybody in America. And so punishment here it becomes more impersonal, right? And punishment here is often the loss of access to resources and things like that. Those resources can be anything from cash money, you got to pay your fines, or loss of access to freedom, right? That we put you in a jail, right? And so this is where you see the development of a legal system, because I don't know you. I don't know exactly what you did. I don't know the person that accused you of doing something quote unquote wrong in our society. And so we have to have a more formalized way to address it. And so naturally, we're going to end up with a legal system. But that also means that we end up with structural power. And when you have structural power, you have structural violence, which I've spoken on a little bit before. But structural violence is this idea of society being structured in such a way as to perpetuate cycles of violence against individuals. And so I have all of the power. So it becomes much easier to make sure that me and my group, whether that's my family or my religious sect, or whatever, right? Keep that power. And I'm going to need to find ways to keep you away from that power. I don't want to spread it around any, right? And so structural violence is the way in which this gets enacted. Okay. And let me just mention very quickly here about social inequality in the law. Um, uh, uh, Obviously, we are having a huge conversation and have been for some time in the United States about social inequality in the law. And some people can quite readily see this, and others, oftentimes who have never actually had to deal with it, do not realize that it's even a problem. But one of the things that I want to say is that when it comes to structural violence, I said that they are these systems that perpetuate cycles of violence. Now, that violence can be physical, but it also can be emotional violence. It can be economic violence. It can be ways in which you are harmed. But the powerful thing about structural violence is it doesn't necessarily need anyone to be an active asshole about it, right? And a good example of this was a study that was done in Australia. What they found was when Australian youth, Aboriginal youth, I should say, were being arrested at a much higher rate than whites were for petty crimes. And so everybody saw this and they went, oh, see, everybody's racist. All the cops are racist. Well, an anthropologist started studying this problem and realized that it actually wasn't because of racism on the part of cops. And I'm not at all claiming that there aren't plenty of racist cops. But the reason that the Aboriginal youth were getting arrested more was because of well-meaning policies that were put into place. If a youth was caught, someone, a minor, underage, was caught doing something kind of a petty crime, like vandalism or like minor shoplifting, or like trespassing or, just something kid stuff, right? Not, shooting people, right? Just kid stuff. The cops had the discretion of whether or not to arrest them and take them in or not. And the guideline was if you can call their parents and either their mother or their father will come pick them up, then you can just like write them a ticket or give them a warning or something like that. What this anthropologist realized was because of structural violence, Aborigines have been living in poverty for generation upon generation and are a lot less likely to actually own a telephone. Okay. They're also a lot less likely to be being raised by their mom or their dad, either because their parents died or their parents had to move away to find work. And so they're living with an older sibling or grandma or my aunt or whoever because, mom and dad moved to Sydney and they're working some job and sending money home to support me. And so what was happening was that when these cops would arrest an Aboriginal youth, they couldn't call anybody, or if they could, it'd be like, well, yeah, I'm his cousin. And people go, well, I'm not talking to his cousin. I need the mom or dad. Yeah, but the cousin is the one that's taken care of. The aunt is the one that's taken care of. You know, grandma's the one that's taking care of them, even though it's not mom or dad, right? And so sometimes these things get put into place, and we don't even realize the implications of what they're going to be, right? And so that's the other problem when you have a much more impersonal legal system. Okay. All right. Well, that is it. Thank you guys. I'm going to keep this short and sweet. I will see you soon.